All right. So, good day, everyone, depending on what time zone you're in. Um, we are going to go live officially at 11 sharp. I see there's a few people viewing right now. If anyone in the chat could maybe let me know if my audio is working, can you hear me? As far as I can tell, it should be fine. Oh, hi, Mary. Thank you. Oh, Patrick. Wonderful. That's great. That's good. Okay. Oh, that's nice. Wonderful. Um, Nice to hear from you all. I see some familiar names from my email correspondence. Um, Bunny, I think I know what you might be referring to. Maybe could you check your inbox and see if the message I sent to you got back? Usually, it is correct that we accept these individualized and personalized video calls, but usually we like to ask for clarifications on the questions that you want to talk about beforehand. In the case I think you're talking about, we didn't get any questions beforehand, so we cancelled the meeting. Yes, that's correct, Muhammad. Yes. Um, yeah. In your case, I sent you a message asking you if you could maybe let me know what questions you wanted to talk about. I didn't get a reply, I think, so I cancelled the meeting. You can book a new one, or you can just ask your questions in the second part of this presentation as well. Jazreel Kairos Olarte. Familiar name, familiar name. Nice to see you again. Yes. Okay. It's 11. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see that we have a live audience and that some of you are willing to join in live for this session. My name is Jelmer Herms. I am the Euroculture coordinator for the program of Euroculture Groningen, and I'm also working with the Euroculture Consortium in general as a sort of coordinating member as well. Today, we're going to talk about the Euroculture program, the ins and outs, what it's about. So the first part of the session will be more of me talking with a presentation, going through some of the basics of the program, some of its upsides, why we think it's a particularly valuable program for you to study. And then in the second part, we'll make it more interactive with the Q&A. Although I really like the interaction, so if you have questions during the presentation, just put them in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on it. If anything's unclear at any moment, if you feel like you need clarification, please just type out a message. I'm happy to go over something again or stop and pause, so take your time and let me know. Okay, I think with that we can get started. So, well, you as an audience here live will have heard of Euroculture before because you managed to find this live stream, but I'd like to start from the beginning anyway. So, what is Euroculture? So, Euroculture, with the subtitle Society, Politics and Culture in a Global Context, is a 2-year 120 ECTS European Studies program. Additionally, we are also an Erasmus Mundus program, meaning that we offer Erasmus Mundus scholarships. Unfortunately, I would have liked to have been joined by a current scholarship student, but unfortunately they couldn't make it at the last minute, so it's just going to be me today. But if you have questions, also maybe to actual current scholarship students, just send us an email at, I will just put that in the chat right now, euroculture@rug.nl, and you can always get in touch with me directly or one of our current students if you're interested in that sort of thing. So we try to be as communicative as possible, so if you have any questions, anything that comes up, don't hesitate to let us know. Anyway, so as I was saying, Euroculture is an interdisciplinary European studies program. So what that means is we don't just take a single academic discipline. In fact, we combine multiple into the curriculum. We are small scale in the sense that our classrooms are usually between 5 to 20 people at a time at any particular university. We are 120 ECTS, which is the European Credit Transfer System, for those of you who are not familiar, which corresponds to a 2-year master program. Additionally, as you might know, we are fully English taught at all of our European and non-European partner universities. We are organized as a consortium, so what that means is we are a collaboration of multiple different universities in Europe that work together to facilitate this program. And finally, in terms of the basics, we are an Erasmus Mundus joint master program, and what that means is, first of all, that we can offer the Erasmus Mundus scholarship, but it additionally also means that we offer a joint master degree. The basics of what that means is that you get a joint diploma at the end of your studies, which is a diploma that is offered by 2 universities combined. Please note that this is technically different from a double degree. A double degree is 2 diplomas offered by 2 universities. A joint degree is 1 degree offered by 2 universities together. So that's a small technical difference, but one that we sometimes get questions about, so I just wanted to make that clear. So some of the basic advantages of studying Euroculture are that we are considered a Master of Excellence and a flagship program by the European Commission. What that means is Euroculture actually turned 25 years old this year. So we've been around, in terms of the context of Erasmus Mundus, we've been around since 2005, if I'm not mistaken. So we've been offering this program for a long time, and we have built a good reputation within the context of the Erasmus Mundus program. We are one of the oldest consortia in this context in Europe. We've been around for a while, so you could say we know what we're doing. Generally speaking, Euroculture is recognized as a top master program in most of the countries that it is taught in. For example, our program, Euroculture Groningen here, was even just last year in 2023, based on the 2022 results obviously, considered to be the top-rated European studies program in the Netherlands. So in terms of study quality, our program still does very well. Additionally, Euroculture gets strong and positive alumni evaluations, so we often get good feedback from students of our program, and that's also something that translates to employers, who generally find that Euroculture students are well prepared for their positions, do well, and as such, there are many organizations out there who come to us and ask for our students, and see, well, do you have any available, for example, for internships or positions? So generally speaking, these are some of the benefits of the Euroculture program and the reputation that it has. Like I mentioned, Euroculture is interdisciplinary, and that means that you can apply to Euroculture with a pretty large variety of academic backgrounds. I've listed some of the main ones here, as it mentions on the right hand side. This is not an exhaustive list. So what I mean by that is, and this is a pretty good overview of all the different disciplines we tend to accept, but as I can see from the audience now, many of you are from various national contexts, so you might use slightly different terminology, or your academic systems might work slightly differently. But generally speaking, these are the disciplines that we're looking for. If you think you might have a relevant background but you're not sure, you can ask us at euroculture@rug.nl. So RUG stands for Rijksuniversiteit Groningen, which is the University of Groningen. So just in case you were wondering why that domain, but that's why. Yeah, so it's not an exhaustive list. So this is just an overview of where our students generally come from and the backgrounds that we're looking for. The general principle that you should hold to when it comes to considering whether you're relevant or not is, do you have a background in the arts, the humanities, or the social sciences? So that's the relevant backgrounds that we consider for the program. Sometimes, for example, we get applications from students that have a background in engineering or chemistry. Those backgrounds really aren't so relevant to the program and will just not be accepted. So it's important that you have a degree from a relevant academic background, otherwise we won't be able to consider your application. And of course, studying a program that you don't have a background in, that's quite challenging for you as well. So that's something you might want to avoid. So the curriculum of Euroculture, as I mentioned, is interdisciplinary as well, not just the students that study the program. So you could say, very broadly speaking, if you remember the subtitle Society, Politics and Culture in a Global Context, that these are the kinds of disciplines that we're dealing with. So generally speaking, you could say that Euroculture offers a curriculum revolving around international politics, history, arts, culture, and languages. So Euroculture kind of exists at the intersection of these different academic disciplines. And that's also how the curriculum is structured based on these different disciplines. Maybe it's good to mention here, some students worry about this, like, wow, I just did a languages degree, or I just did an arts and culture degree. I don't know so much about politics. I don't know so much about history. How am I going to survive this program if we're going to be covering all of these things? Don't worry about that too much. I'll talk about that a bit more, but basically the idea is that you also learn about these different disciplines during your program, and you're not supposed to be an expert on everything before you start. So if you, for example, hold a degree in history, it's not a big problem if you are not yet familiar with international politics, because Euroculture will, of course, go into that subject matter and teach you, also knowing that many students come from many different academic disciplines and might not be familiar with the basics of other things. So that's also accounted for in the curriculum as well. Okay, good. As I mentioned, we're a European network, so Euroculture is actually offered at multiple European universities at once, meaning that you can choose where to start and study the program from there. We have 8 European universities that offer Euroculture and 4 non-European universities that offer part of the curriculum of Euroculture. So the European network consists of, firstly, these 4, so that's the University of Groningen, the University of Deusto, Bilbao, so that's in Spain. Groningen, of course, is in the Netherlands. The University of Göttingen, which is in Germany. And then there is the University of Krakow, specifically the Jagiellonian University in Krakow. Sometimes there's multiple universities, so just to make sure that that's clear, it's the Jagiellonian University. Then the other 4 European partner universities include the University of Olomouc in the Czech Republic. Then there's the University of Strasbourg in France. Then there is the University of Udine in Italy. And finally, then there's the University of Uppsala in Sweden. Yeah, so interestingly, part of our program can also be followed at one of our non-European universities. Should be specified right here, I think, because some of you in the audience might not have a European citizenship. If you don't, unfortunately, you cannot follow the third country mobility track. So what that means is, if you are a non-European, you cannot take this particular part of the course outside of Europe. But of course, as we will go into it, there are still a ton of other options for you to choose from. But the non-European track is only available to European nationals. So we have 4 non-European partner universities. The newest one, the newest addition to our consortium as of this year, is Queen's University in Kingston, Canada. So that's a new partner for us that's going to be offering their first ever mobility track next fall. So that's quite exciting. We're very happy to have them in our network. Of course, there's a couple of other partners that have been around a bit longer. So Osaka University in Japan has been around with Euroculture for a long time as well. It's a long-lasting partnership. And there's the Pune University in India, which is similar in that it's quite an old partner of Euroculture at this point, well established within the Euroculture network as well. And the same goes for UNAM in Mexico City in Mexico. So these are our 4 non-European partner universities. You don't have to remember all of the names right off the top of your head. I'll kind of contextualize what it means to study at these different universities in a minute. Good. Roughly speaking, you can divide Euroculture into 4 semesters, each with a different function. And every semester can be followed, mostly speaking, at a different university, but you don't have to. So that's also good to mention, is you can make a lot of choices in where you study during Euroculture, which in turn has an impact on the curriculum itself as well. But roughly speaking, the main structure of the program at all of our partner universities is as follows. During the first semester, you focus on orienting yourself. Like I mentioned, we're an interdisciplinary program, so you're going to kind of be dealing with a lot of different academic subject matter from a lot of different disciplines. In the first semester is kind of where we provide you a basic frame of reference for the Euroculture approach, as we broadly speaking call it, where we provide you with a deeper understanding of these various academic disciplines and provide you with a shared frame of reference that allows you to have discussions about the subject matter of European studies with students from different academic disciplines. So having the ability to have a conversation with a history student about Europe in a global context, as opposed to, let's say, an international relations graduate. The goal of the first semester is really to enable you to have conversations with each other and deepen your understanding of, for example, European integration, European history, European politics, and of course European society and culture. So that's really the main goal of semester 1. The goal of semester 2 is specialization. So you make a choice where you want to study during your second semester, and during that decision-making process, you'll find that each university has a slightly different thematic focus. While the main structure of the program is mostly the same everywhere, there are, let's say, different specialized research seminars that you can follow at each of them that will enable you to sort of customize the curriculum in the direction that is more interesting to you. So for example, in the first semester you're kind of, let's say, stuck with all disciplines of Euroculture. So you're dealing with some society, some politics, some culture, some history, maybe even some legal studies as well. That's kind of embedded in the first semester, but in the second semester you can let's say liberate yourself from that a little bit and focus on an element that is more interesting to you. So for example, if you're more interested in history, the University of Olomouc in the Czech Republic offers many additional specialized research seminars on Central Europe and the history of Central Europe, whereas other universities might, for example, have research seminars on slightly different topics. Strasbourg, for example, has a lot of extra courses on human rights, also because of their symbolic location near the European Parliament as well. So that's kind of the idea of semester 2. Semester 3 is where you professionalize, as we call it, which is you can choose to pursue one of 3 options, either a research track with a European university, a professional track, which is a placement supervised by the program, and finally, you can also choose to pursue one of the non-European research track with one of our non-European partner universities. So that's the 4 I just mentioned. Okay, the final semester is where you write your master thesis, which is most of what you do during the 4th semester, but in addition, there's also going to be some preparation for what comes after Euroculture as well. So, for example, we offer a course on project application writing or PhD application writing if you're more interested in research. So that's the basic structure. I'll break it down a little bit more as we go along. Let's see. I just want to make a quick check to see if anyone has any questions. Okay, good. So far, so good. I know it's a lot, so feel free to jump in. Ask me any questions you want. I much prefer these sessions to be interactive, so don't hesitate to jump in. Okay, let's summarize the mobility structure of the program for a second. So, Euroculture offers a lot of mobility options with our different European partners. But this is more or less the general schematic frame of how we do this. In semester 1, you attend one of our 8 European universities. In semester 2, you then move to a different one, and this is always required. So the movement from semester 1 to semester 2 is a mandatory mobility movement. So that's the only time that you have to move, and that's because we as a European studies program argue that it is quite important that you have some experience of multiple European countries as opposed to just one. So for a European national, it's about often diversifying their knowledge, whereas for non-Europeans it's a chance to explore. So that's really why this second semester mobility is mandatory. It's built into the curriculum. Also related to the joint degree, because University A and B together determine where you get your diploma from. So for semester 3 you have more options. You can choose to go back to one of the places you've already been, so University A or B, but you can also choose to go to an entirely different one, either inside or outside Europe. That choice is up to you. And finally, in semester 4, you have to come back to a place you've already been. So what that means is that you can have a minimum of 1 mobility semester and a maximum of 3. So you could attend up to 3 different Euroculture universities during your studies, but you have to attend at least 2. In terms of how the mobility is structured, don't worry. You don't have to make all of these choices in advance of the program. In fact, you only really need to decide your first semester if you apply to Euroculture now. Some of you might have already taken a look at the online application tool. You are asked to submit 3 preferences. Those 3 preferences don't determine your first, second, and third university. They only determine your first university. I should mention, actually, because some of you are applying for the Erasmus Mundus scholarship. If you are applying for the Erasmus Mundus scholarship, it's slightly different. These 3 preferences will determine your first and your second semester, but you can still freely choose your universities in the second year. I hope that's clear. It's a little complicated. Yes, so Rais Sial asks, can we select both the university and the specialization, or just the specialization? That's a good question. I should clarify. The universities determine the specialization. So each of our universities have a focus that is related to the teaching staff there, to the curriculum there, to the courses that they offer. So when you choose a university, you also choose to sign up for a particular specialization or focus. Although I should say, as I mentioned before, the core structure of the program is the same everywhere. So there is room for specialization, there's room for flexibility, but it's not entirely flexible. What that means is there are basic skills that you learn everywhere. Okay. As a Pakistani student, no, because you would have a non-European citizenship. So no, if you are a non-European national, you cannot study with one of our non-European partner universities. Okay, Jazreel Kairos Olarte, hi. Does the University of Groningen specialize international relations and diplomacy? Planning to choose it on the second semester. So broadly speaking, Euroculture Groningen might be a good option for that. However, generally speaking, I would say that our second semester has a specialization related to Europe and the relationship with Asia. So that's historically been our specialization. However, the general course offer does also align well with international relations. For diplomacy, I would argue that you might be better off at one of our other partner universities, maybe in Krakow or in Strasbourg, but that's just it's tough to say. Also because the specialized courses change every year. Yeah. Okay. Okay, final question. I'll get to the assessment criteria later, and also okay. So Iman Yokio, I will save your question for later. It's a good question, but we'll get into that in the second part of the presentation. Let's see. Where do I want to go now? Okay. Maybe just to recap. What does the classroom experience actually look like? Because I've talked a lot of abstract things about structure and how things are working, but what does it look like in practice? So generally speaking, Euroculture offers about 100 study places every year. Oftentimes, not all of those places are filled, but generally we try to fill as many of those places as possible. And then these 100 students are divided across the Euroculture network based on their preferences. So what we aim for is groups between 5 to 20 people at every partner university, which gives you a kind of small scale, highly international group that is working together quite intensely for the course of each semester. So you really have the opportunity to work with the same group of people quite a lot throughout your studies. As I mentioned, the group is highly international. Euroculture has over 1,600 alumni over the past 25 years from over 70 different nationalities, so not 17 but 70. So quite a number of international alumni, both from inside and outside Europe. So we have students from all over the world. That this includes Asia, Africa, the United States, South America. You name it, we've probably had a student from that part of the world. So yeah, there's quite a lot of options available there. I should say that a lot of our classroom experience is project-based active learning. So what that means is we have a lot of discussions in class. There are a lot of projects that you have to work on together in group work. There's a lot of paper writing. What Euroculture doesn't have so much is what you might call sort of reproductive learning. So having to reproduce a set of facts for a particular course. There is some of that in the first semester because we need to establish some basic facts here. I am noticing a spelling mistake. We'll have to correct that later. Anyway, so there is not so much of a focus on learning facts in particular. It's a master level program, so we believe that that's something that stage has kind of passed in your educational experience. It's more so about critically assessing, critical thinking, and project writing and writing itself. Okay. Yes. Good. So let's break down the semesters a little bit more. Because what does it actually look like when you're studying classes in Euroculture? So, as I mentioned, each university is slightly different, but the core idea is the same. So, in semester 1, there's basically 4 different elements that we always focus on. So, first of all, we have a series of modules that you'll come back to throughout the program, which are called the Eurocompetence modules. The Eurocompetence modules are generally designed to focus on transferable skills, on soft skills, on things like project management, courses that serve you well in your future career, and generally also academic skills. So Eurocompetence 1 is in the first semester in particular about transferable and foundational skills, so that focuses on presentation. It focuses on the basics of academic writing again, so most of you will have had experience with academic writing in your bachelor's, but it's more common in some universities than others, so we focus on making sure that you're all up to speed on the foundations of academic writing, so citation, working with sources, and structuring a paper in an academic way. So that's part of Eurocompetence 1. This also includes things like a debate. This includes things like paper writing and presentation. It includes also informal non-academic writing. So for example, you're also asked to write an opinion piece during your first semester as well as part of an assignment. So that's the Eurocompetence module. It's basically a variety of different skills that we train you in. But then next to that, there's also the more, let's say, typically academic courses. So that includes a course on European culture, a course on European politics, and a course on European history. It should be noted that Euroculture takes critical approaches to all of these subjects. So let me put it like this: we don't take a non-critical approach to European history. We really try to critically reflect on what it means to be European, if there's even a concept of Europeanness. So it's really very much about critically assessing, for example, in politics, also the history of European integration. Talking about European culture, you might even raise a discussion about whether there is such a thing as European culture at all. What does it mean to produce European culture? How do European institutions, for example, produce culture? How do other parts of the world identify themselves in contrast with European culture? All these kinds of different questions are raised during the first semester. So it's about learning new things, but it's also about critically reflecting on historical, cultural, and political processes. So that's really the goal of the first semester. And as I mentioned, on the right-hand side there, you can see, you can also see where you can study this program. Important thing to note here is that the University of Deusto is not mentioned. That's correct. Euroculture Deusto is not able to offer the first semester for your cohort, which means you can only study there in your second and fourth semester. So that's just a good thing to keep in mind. So our Spanish partner university does not offer their first semester there. Okay, all clear. Maham Fatima, does the entire batch of students get together? Yes, only during the intensive program. We'll go into that a bit, but there's a summer school at the end of the first year, a 1-week summer school where all the students from all the different universities get together. It's really an amazing experience, but we'll get there later. Yeah, it's a good question. But generally speaking, though, you only see a part of the cohort because you're only going to be at one university at a time. So that's the first semester. For the second semester is what I mentioned before. You have to move to a different university. And these are the highlights of that particular semester. So in the second semester, you get an additional Eurocompetence module. This one is focused on project management and communication. So the main goal of Eurocompetence 2 is you're gonna have to design and implement your own project of your choosing together with a group of other students. That's the main goal of that course. And as you're doing that, you'll be guided by the course and sort of taught how to effectively approach project management. This is a skill that's very highly valued in the labor market, actually, and it's something that we as Euroculture get questions about quite regularly from employers, where they ask us, hey, well, this student mentioned that they did project management during your program. What does that look like? How does that work? And generally speaking, you can see that it's quite a valuable skill to have that helps you in your career. Additionally, every Euroculture university, so this is all regardless of where you go, there is a course on theory and methodology, which is the goal of which is to expand and improve your research skills. So this might be, for example, weekly or bi-weekly lectures on different research methodologies. For example, if you're a history student, you might not be so familiar with how cultural studies are taught. So maybe one week we'll focus more on a methodology that might help you work in the context of cultural studies, if that, for example, is part of your research interests. Okay. And this comes back to what I mentioned before. Each university has also specialized research seminars. They are dependent on the thematic focus of your university. So I don't have all of them available off the top of my head, but what you can do is go to our website at euroculturemaster.eu, and at euroculturemaster.eu there's a page for each university, and on that page you'll also be able to find the different thematic focuses of each university. So if you want to know a little bit more about what kinds of specializations there are, I would recommend that you check that out there. But essentially what you will find is that our universities covers the same specializations that sort of correspond with the themes of Euroculture. So that's society, politics, culture, history, to some extent also maybe even disciplines like theology. So there's different options there. Good, and this is what I came back to as well, the annual intensive program. Maybe let's just cover that now. Here we go. Yes. So what is the intensive program? It's the chance for you at the end of the first year to work with students from the entire Euroculture network. The IP is 1 week long. It's covered by the program, so your accommodation and your program are covered by the Euroculture Consortium as part of your tuition fees. Should be noted that travel and not all meals are included, but most of the costs are covered by the consortium. It's a week-long conference that focuses on a current European academic development or a current European development, let's say. So maybe what you saw here on this slide is No Europe for the Young. That was the theme of last year's IP in Olomouc in the Czech Republic. So we provide you with a theme and then you have a conference on that particular theme. We do projects and excursions around that theme, and there's also other fun activities like, for example, a career day, where we invite alumni from all over the consortium to talk to you and sort of tell you about their careers, things that help them, how Euroculture helped them prepare for their career paths, etc., etc. It's a very great opportunity to advance that sort of professional side of things. And of course, at the end of the week, there's also always the gala dinner, which is a great opportunity to celebrate the successes, the struggles that you've gone through together at the end of the first week. It's a really, really wonderful experience, generally seen as one of the major highlights of the program. And I have to say, it's always a pleasure, very exciting to see and to see what the students come up with during their projects. So that's it's wonderful, and really, I can recommend it. I should maybe mention I can recommend it also because I'm an alumnus of the program myself as well. So I've studied it, I've lived it. So you can also, of course, ask me questions from that perspective. Cassie asks, are European languages taught as part of the program? No, not as part of the program. However, we do recommend that you take language classes, which is possible. So each of our European universities usually offers additional language classes, but these are extracurricular. The program is entirely taught in English, so you don't need to speak any other language but English during your studies. However, it's a European studies program that does value languages, so that's something to keep in mind. I think that's everything for the second semester. I want to kind of speed through this a little bit. So the third semester is the most complicated one. Hence this, let's say, more complicated overview here. Essentially, you have three different options. You have to either prepare for a research track within Europe and gain research experience. So this is really a good opportunity if you're maybe interested in, for example, like a PhD afterwards or a research career, then this is really the track for you. You can go to one of our European universities and work with researchers on actual projects that they're working on. In some cases, and even in my personal case, that led to a publication where you're mentioned as one of the contributors. So it's really a great opportunity to actually gain some research experience to bolster your CV in that particular field. Alternatively, and that's kind of the theme that you see throughout the curriculum, is that we distinguish between a more vocational track, so people interested working in the field, in the labor market afterwards, and the academic track. So that's really working within the university and researching within a university context. So that distinction is also made here. So you can choose to either pursue that sort of research track, or you can choose to pursue our vocational and professional track with any organization within the EU or even outside the EU. There's really no restrictions aside from the fact that the internship needs to be relevant to Euroculture in some way. So you need to work in an international context maybe, or there needs to be a European dimension to whatever it is that you're doing. But that's quite broad, and there's quite a lot of room to adapt that to your interests. So that's always something. If you're interested in working in a particular field, there's usually a way to make that work in most cases. So okay, and finally, there's the research track outside Europe, where you have the chance to study with one of our non-European partners if you're a European citizen. Generally speaking, this track is kind of an immersive experience for one semester. They basically allow you to experience what it's like to study there for one semester. They'll take you on excursions to explore the region that the university is based in. This includes like all kinds of fun field trips. Generally speaking, these partners are quite experienced in dealing with Euroculture students, so they craft a very nicely personalized program for you. So that's really a wonderful experience if you're never, for example, if you've never been outside of Europe. It's a very cool thing. Good. Also, for the sake of time, I think I should maybe move on, because the Q&A part is probably the more interesting thing for you and for your questions as well. Finally, the fourth semester of the program is where you write your master thesis. You go back to either your first or your second university. And aside from your thesis writing, you also follow the final Eurocompetence module, which has two tracks, one focusing on project application writing and another track focusing on PhD application writing. So again, you see that sort of, let's say, track choice between vocational training and academic training. And there's also a thesis seminar that kind of runs in between the other courses that helps you to present your work and gain feedback before you actually submit it at the end of the semester. So that's the structure of the program. It's quite a lot, I know, so we can go back to specific elements that you're more interested in later as well. Yes, what does a Euroculture alumnus actually do? So this is good maybe to mention, because this seems like a very general, broad program in many ways, but what does that then mean for your career? Because I mentioned that it's a good program in terms of employability. Well, these are the fields and the skills that we train people to have, and these are the fields that they work in. So generally speaking, we see our alumni ending up in sectors related to project management, management and coordination, marketing and communication, administrative work, research. So this is academic research, but also maybe things like think tanks as well. So it's research within and outside the academic context. Advising and consultancy is a common one that we see. Policy making, This is within local, national, regional, and also European politics. We have quite a number of alumni in Brussels, but also alumni working in national politics in various European countries or even beyond. Quite a few outside of Europe as well, in fact. Also lobbying, reporting, editing, and translation work. Concretely speaking, the skills that people are looking for are the ability to present, communicate, think critically, write well, and write quickly. These are things that employers value very much, and especially the intercultural communication skills that you learn just by dealing with this large international group of people are considered to be very helpful in many careers, because you're sensitive to cultural differences, you're sensitive to let's say different interests that might arise from that, different cultures, different experiences, different lived experiences, and that helps you very much in navigating many workplace environments. Additionally, the reputation of the program is quite helpful in the sense that we're well known and liked in Brussels. We're a well-established European project. We have a lot of alumni working in Brussels, and it is not uncommon that you find suddenly that your supervisor or your director is an established Euroculture graduate. It happens not never. It happens semi-regularly, in fact. So Euroculture is quite well established, and what you see is that there is a sense of community with Euroculture students, in that that people tend to look out for each other if they have the opportunity to do so. So this is a little bit older because our more recent data is still being processed right now, but from our last alumni survey from 2019, 90% of our graduates find a relevant position within 6 months. I should specify that 70% find a relevant position within 3 months. So what you see is, generally speaking, our students find jobs very quickly, which is good. And they are, of course, relevant positions in the sense that they relate to these sectors that we prepare people for. I think I already mentioned the soft skills. Yeah, and I alluded to our alumni community. We're active on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, in closed groups, open groups, where we sometimes try to organize activities. We share vacancies. So, for example, I often send out vacancies that come into me also to alumni. So it's not just as soon as you leave the program, doesn't mean that all support and all help is currently dropped. You become a member of our alumni community in a sense, and in that sense, you once you're a part of Euroculture, it's not so easy to let it go just because you graduated. Okie dokie. Maybe let's also reflect for a moment on the scholarship and what it actually does. So I imagine that many of you are interested in the Erasmus Mundus scholarship. So this slide kind of gives you the basics. So the Erasmus Mundus scholarship includes, for all grantees, 24 installments of 1,000 euros for monthly living allowance payments. So that's just step one. Every Erasmus Mundus scholarship holder gets that. All your tuition fees are covered, so you don't have to pay any tuition fees for the program if you hold the scholarship. The scholarship includes compensation for your travel, depending on the country of origin. So basically what I mean by that is, the further you live away, the more travel compensation you get. And for example, so for European nationals, generally there's not so much available in this category, but if you live quite far outside of Europe, for example, I heard Pakistan come by, it can be, of course, multiple thousands of euros for your travel costs. And installation costs as well. So installation costs are costs that you have to make, for example, to get your visa. These are we prepay an amount of money for that to enable you to cover those costs. Some notes here. if you're a scholarship student, so that's a distinction that I already made, but I'll make it again. First and second semester destinations are set in advance if you're a scholarship holder. This is because we provide you with a contract, and that contract requires a little bit more specificity than would be the case for students that finance their own studies. It should be noted that the scholarship also always includes health insurance for the 2 years of your studies that cover you globally. So wherever you go, you'll have health insurance to cover you. Geographical diversity in the selection process is guaranteed. So what I mean by that is we are basically, because of the way the Erasmus Mundus project is structured, we are required to target students from a variety of geographical regions and windows defined by the European Commission. So that basically means that we actively look also for students outside, let's say outside the European Union, and in fact 75% of our scholarships have to go to non-European nationals. So most of our scholarships are available for non-European nationals, but European nationals are nevertheless entirely allowed to apply and participate in the scholarship program as well. However, we have fewer scholarships available for them. If you want to be a scholarship holder, you have to hold your degree by January 10, or you need to have graduated by January 10. So what that means is you need to have completed your bachelor's degree by January 10 and submit proof of that as part of your application. If you don't hold your degree by this date, we cannot consider you for the scholarship. This is for various logistical reasons. We don't want to run the risk of preparing a lot of documents for a scholarship student that ends up not finishing a particular course in the end, or let's say, or is still working actively on all kinds of courses as we're preparing the application, because the scholarship administration process is sometimes a lot for you and for us, so we want to make sure that scholarship holders are ready to go by January 10. Additionally, and this is something that not everyone realizes, regardless of whether you apply for the scholarship or not, it's the same process, right? So it's one application process for both types of applications. So mostly the date of application matters the most here. If you are not eligible to receive the scholarship for whatever reason, or you didn't make it in the selection, you are always still invited to join the program as a self-financing student. So what that means is you can, even if you are not sure that you will be able to receive the scholarship, you can always try. And if it doesn't work, we will still consider you as a self-financing student as long as you meet all of our minimum assessment criteria. So as long as your application file is complete and everything is in order, you can still be completely considered as a self-financing student. So yeah, for the scholarship, it doesn't hurt to try. It's the same application process, just the date by which it has to be submitted is different. Okay, so I see some questions pop up. Yes, I think I'll just go into this now because this slide is very much about the scholarship. Should I mention my motivation to work abroad in the EU for a while to boost my work experience and portfolio, or should I only focus on highlighting my willingness to contribute back to it? No. You should definitely focus on your career and why you think Euroculture is valuable to your career. It's good to mention that you want to give back to your country, but that shouldn't be the goal, I think, primarily of your motivation. It's completely fine to mention that you want to use Euroculture to boost an international career, because that's what we are for. So that's completely fine to mention. Every motivation is different. There's no perfect motivation letter. It's a chance for you to reflect on your past academic journey, your future academic career or non-academic career, and why Euroculture would be a good choice for you. Yeah, so we can go into the specifics of the motivation letter a bit more later, but that's the short answer, is there's no perfect motivation letter. Yeah. In your experience, are more students scholarship holders or self-financing their studies? So for Euroculture, generally speaking, the majority of our students are self-financing. Basically, there's only a limited number of scholarships available every year. Basically, there's only so much money available to offer the scholarships. So usually what we see is maybe 22 to 25 scholarship holders, and ideally we would also then have another 70 something self-financing students. The past few years we've had slightly fewer students, so especially for self-financing student there's a lot of opportunity to join the program at the moment. But for self-financing students we see that it's maybe more like 50. So 50 self-financing students and then 20 to 25 scholarship holders. So the majority of our students are actually self-financing students, which is fairly exceptional for Erasmus Mundus as well, which I think is an indication of the strength of our program, because people find it interesting enough to finance it themselves. Okay. Do you also consider work experiences with a multicultural, intercultural setting? Yes, absolutely we do. You should absolutely mention all your intercultural and international experiences on your CV. Also, if they have been remote. For example, if you attended an online scholarship, an online summer school or internship or any other thing remotely during COVID, we value that as well. So because of course many of you will have had your studies partly during the COVID pandemic, we account for that. So if you did extracurricular things during COVID, mention them always. Mention all relevant experiences. I've seen another Erasmus Mundus master state that if they already accepted a certain amount of students from one country in the previous years, that they won't accept new ones from there. Is this valid? Yes. So there is a particular balance there. So what I should explain. So essentially we have what you would call geographical windows, and what that means is a particular number of our scholarships, and that's not all of them, but maybe 50% are reserved for people from particular regions in the world. The other half are basically up for anyone that can apply. So part of it is completely based on the highest evaluations, but some of them need to be given to students from particular regions. But once those windows are filled, there's no more scholarships available in that window. So it's yes and no, essentially. We do accept students from most nationalities. So it could be that your application was sufficient to get you a window scholarship, and then you might be able to get that there. Whereas, but within the, let's say, what we call partner country scholarship category, you can you can apply as any nationality, so it doesn't matter. So yes and no. We do target actively particular parts of the world, but there's also a category of scholarship students for which that doesn't matter. Okay. Is there an age limit for application to the program? No, there is not an age limit, although if you are more senior, we might want to talk to you some more, just to determine why you would want to pursue a master's at this point in your career, for example. But it's possible. There's no age limit, strictly speaking. Also, because in different academic cultures, it's more common to study when you're a bit older than in others. So there's no strict age limit. Patrick asks, are there universities which are more popular than others, and therefore if you apply to them it's hard to get into the program? If so, which are one of those would that be? Okay. Partly. So some Euroculture universities are more popular than others. So historically speaking, you would see that the universities of Strasbourg, Groningen, Göttingen tend to attract more people. That doesn't reflect the quality at all. That's just, let's say, how actively those universities are known in people's mental maps, as you might think about it. Because all of our European universities are quite good, so you'd be fine anywhere. But those are the ones that historically tend to attract more people. What I would say is, however, so let's say you submit an application and your application is of sufficient quality. If your first university of preference is full, we simply forward it to the second one. So it doesn't really affect your chances to be accepted at all. Although the popularity might affect your ability to go to a particular university, but it doesn't actually affect your chances to get into the program, because all universities maintain the same application procedure. We have one consortium, one application procedure. So if you would be accepted in one university, you would also be accepted in another university. So it doesn't affect your chances, but it might affect your destination. However, if you apply for the scholarship window, you're basically guaranteed to get the first place university that you want. As I mentioned before, the last few years we haven't been able to fill all self-financing slots in the self-financing category. So generally speaking, you can go to whatever university you prefer without too much issue. Yeah. Hope that answers your question. Hello. One of the program requirements is to submit an academic writing sample, whether essays or a research project. Does it strictly have to be centered around Euroculture topics? No. The purpose of the writing sample is to assess whether you can write academically at all, basically. So it's more so looking at, and this relates to the earlier question I was saving regarding the quality of the writing sample. What we look at when we refer to quality is formal elements, your ability to structure the paper, the quality of the language use. So it's really the formal elements that are more interesting to us. If you have relevant writing experience, that's preferable, but it's not required. So basically, we want a sample of writing to show that you know how academic writing works, and that you can do it competently. Jacob asks, for scholarship recipients, is working part-time allowed for more exposure, or are they encouraged to just focus on the program? That's a great question, Jacob. I would say generally we would recommend that you focus on the program as much as possible. However, it is possible and allowed to work next to your studies. You can also pursue an internship and receive some limited compensation for your internship without that affecting your scholarship. So it's possible and allowed to supplement your income, but we would not recommend it generally, because if you hold the scholarship, you are in a luxury position. That eases your financial burden when you're studying in Europe, and we think that you should use that advantage to complete your program and try to avoid, for example, doing too much and then running into delays, because once the 24 months of the scholarship are over, they are over. There is no more support if you run into study delays, and that can make your life a lot more complicated than it would have to be otherwise. So we would generally recommend, if you hold the scholarship, to finish your studies first. Yeah. So Eman Yokio, can you please address my question mentioned above the research paper? Let me see if I missed any element. I hope I answered your question already with my previous answer. So quality is really referring to formal elements. Topic matters, but it's not essential. Yeah, I think that's the main answer. Yeah. What about digital conferences during COVID? Should you include them? Yes, please do. I hope I just mentioned that. Yes, absolutely. Make sure that you include your experiences during COVID as well, because it would be very unfair of us to discriminate against people that have not had the opportunities to do internships across the world. So we account for that. So absolutely, if you have these multiple conferences during COVID, mention them on your CV. It shows that you're active and engaged and willing to consider these topics. So yeah. Daffy, can we still apply to this master's program even though we already have a master's degree? Yes, and this is an important topic and also a somewhat complicated one. Students that already hold a master's degree are, generally speaking, deprioritized for the Erasmus Mundus scholarship. What that means is that they will have a lower chance of getting it. It's not impossible. It's a lower chance. And why is that the case? The main reason that's the case is because our ideal student profile is someone who has only completed a bachelor's degree and wants to use Erasmus Mundus to expand their academic horizons, to move to a different place in the world sometimes. So generally speaking, Erasmus Mundus offers opportunities to recently graduated bachelor students, and that's why we prefer to target students that have only completed a BA. However, and this is an important however, in some national contexts you are not allowed to study Euroculture with just a bachelor's degree. This has to do with institutional quality, with the structure of the bachelor courses, so in some cases it is actually required for you to have a master's degree. So this is complicated. Essentially. So even if you have a master's degree, I would generally say try to apply, because you do have a chance. But we, during the application process, will have to assess whether your academic background requires a master's degree or does not require a master's degree in order for you to be admissible, and depending on what we decide there, this might affect your chances for the scholarship. But generally speaking, the rule of thumb that you can keep to is if you hold a European equivalent master's degree, you would be deprioritized for the scholarship. And by European equivalent, we are referring to institutional and degree quality. A European master's degree, generally speaking, would mean that you get deprioritized for the scholarship. Yeah. Hope that's clear. Let me know if I can clarify any part of that. Eman asks, I do have experience of working on Fiverr, of providing digital marketing services for 3 years to international clients of different nationalities. Can I add this in my CV? Yes. Please fill out any experience you think is relevant in your CV. It can all impact your application. Don't mention all of it in your motivation letter, but make sure that it's all in your CV, so we can see what you've done. That's important, yeah, because we consider these things also. For example, if you have a degree that is less relevant, you might want to compensate for that with, let's say, work experience. So yeah. Maham Fatima asks, how tough or easy are the studies itself and exams? Is it easy to get good grades if you have done so previously in your bachelor's? That's a very tough question to ask, because easy and difficult are value judgments that also relate to academic culture, and there's very big differences in perceptions of what is easy and not easy. So generally saying, I would say that European bachelor students who are used to for example, if you've studied in the Dutch or Western European context before, Euroculture is a doable program. It's, I would say, average workload. It's full-time. You'll need to spend most of your focus on it, but it's doable without too many serious issues. But you have to take into consideration, especially in the case that you might be a non-European national, that you have to take into consideration you're adapting to a new culture, you're adapting to a new environment, you're studying in a different way, you're kind of decentered, let's say, you're in a different environment. So those are compounding effects that might make your studies feel more difficult, and that make your experience more complicated. So taking all of those kinds of things into effect as well, it's difficult to say whether Euroculture is easy or tough, because some people are very adaptable to that, whereas others struggle with that a bit more initially. I would say that non-European nationals sometimes struggle, although most of them are doing well as well. Usually, what I mentioned, it's a matter of learning to adapt to a new academic culture, which takes a little bit of time sometimes. So, for example, in Groningen, we have a very hands-on approach to studies, whereas in Sweden, I think Groningen and Sweden, so Uppsala would be nice contrasts here. So Groningen has kind of a hands-on approach, where we have a lot of weekly small assignments to keep you working and engaged throughout your studies, whereas, and this is also to check in on your progress, especially if you're used to an academic culture like Sweden, where it's quite hands-off, and usually you only have paper deadlines, but nothing, you can kind of study at your own pace. That might might feel very overwhelming because you're not used to it. However, the workload is the same everywhere, theoretically. So the program is 120 ECTS, so that term I used, European Credit Transfer System. Every credit you earn corresponds to a certain amount of time worked. What that means is 120 credits basically roughly is the equivalent of 2 years of full-time work. So that's also what you should prepare for, but it's doable. If you've gotten good grades previously, I think you wouldn't find the transition impossible or particularly super challenging. But there's also external things you have to keep in mind, like you have to move, you have to do all kinds of other things. Okay, let me know if I need to go into something else. If I'm not mistaken, there is some form of funding for self-funding students as well. Could you talk about those by any chance? Absolutely. So let's see. Okay. Actually, let me just we'll close the presentation for now. I'll just zoom in on my face. Hello. Okay. Some form of self-financing students. So essentially there's multiple ways of financing your studies in a self-financing capacity as well. The main ones are the Erasmus Plus grant, and important information. If you're interested in any of this stuff, I'm linking our tuition fees page here. Euroculturemaster.eu has the answers to most of your questions anyway. So alternative funding options are also mentioned there, and what you can see is we have the tuition fee waiver for European nationals. We have the Erasmus Plus grant that's generally available in most of these cases. So that's an extra financial incentive to reduce the overall costs a bit. Then there is also an additional Erasmus Plus grant that can be granted if you're, for example, trying to do a placement. Which is not insignificant. We're talking about maybe 2,000 euros in some cases, so it's not nothing. This is always applied to through your university, so it's not officially offered by Euroculture, but it is something that is generally available at our partner universities. And also, if you're going to our non-European partner universities, there's also the consortium third country mobility grant, which is offered partly through the Marco Polo fund or through the consortium itself. So there is financial support available, and that's not to mention any kinds of national funding schemes that might be available. This is something that I would always follow up with the coordinator of the university that you want to go to. They might have some more information, for example, or for scholarships. Let's say you want to go to France and study in France. Check out, for example, with our coordinator in France to see, hey, maybe are there additional national scholarships available for studying in France that I might be able to apply to? The coordinators at each university might be able to help you with that. What are your thoughts regarding the work experience that are irrelevant to your culture but with transferable skills? Okay, I'm gonna say what you mean by that is thematically irrelevant, because if the skills are transferable, then I wouldn't say it's irrelevant. In that case, if you think there are transferable skills that are relevant to your culture, then mention them. I think that's always a good sign and a good idea to do that. Also, in turn, because it also shows that you are reflecting on this critically. I'm thinking about, well, I understand that this might not be thematically relevant, but it does show that you are looking to learn particular skills or expand particular skills. So I think it's a great idea to actually mention things that are less relevant if you can show the link, if you can show the relevancy. Jacob asks, although it was indicated that the second recommendation letter comes from a professional or non-academic reference, how would a double academic reference affect the application? So Jacob, that's a good question. You're partly correct in how that's phrased. However, your second reference letter may be from a professional organization, but doesn't have to be. So 2 academic letters are completely fine, completely acceptable, and you don't need to worry about that affecting your chances in the application. Yeah, so don't worry about that too much. Is remote work experience acceptable, Anastasia, teaching students online for integration purposes? That's completely acceptable. Yes, we understand that your cohort had to deal with COVID, and we want to account for that. So if you have remote online experience, that's considered as well. Okay. Someone in the chat asked about the age limit, and you mentioned that if an applicant is more senior, you will have to carefully consider them. In your opinion, what is the desirable age category? I hesitate to put a number to that, but let's say from my personal experience, I would say if you are above 40, we will probably need to have an extra chat with you. But here's the thing, and this is also something I mentioned before, in many national contexts, it's very normal to have a few years of work experience after your bachelor's before going into a master's. So, and it's also, even if you are above 40, that doesn't mean you're ineligible. It just means that we need to see clearly why at this point in your life you would like to do a master's degree. And we've had students like that before that do quite well. But we do just want to have an extra, let's say, discussion about why and how, and because what you often see is people with more advanced careers are not as incentivized to finish the program itself because they have other opportunities. They're not so dependent on the program, and therefore they drop out at a higher rate because they might just decide that they don't want to do it anymore, and that's something that we generally want to be a little bit careful with. But like I mentioned, there's no strict age limit. You can always try. We just want to make sure that your motivation is in the right place. Yeah. In terms of fully enjoying the student life in each university, since you have to move almost every semester, are you able to join clubs and other orgs? That's a good question. So, first of all, you don't have to move almost every semester. Let me clarify that now. You only have to move once. You can choose, depending on what your preferences are, to move multiple times, but you can also choose to stay in the universities that you've been to before in the second year, for example. I take myself as an example. I studied Euroculture Groningen in my first semester, then I went to Germany in the second, but for my entire second year, I moved back to the Netherlands and stayed there for the rest of my studies. So for me, I've only been abroad, let's say, for 6 months. And the other 3, let's say 1 and 3/4, wait, no, 1.5 years, I was in the same place. So that's something I want to challenge a little bit and say, well, actually, you don't need to move around that much. You can if you want to. You really can move every semester, but you don't have to. However, regarding joining student clubs and student orgs, yes, that's always something that we usually provide you with more information with during the first weeks, during the introduction. We know that we are very experienced in dealing with international students coming in. Like I mentioned, 25 years of experience at this point. So we know how to deal with students in your situation. We are familiar with let's say the worries that come with it, the sort of let's say the homesickness, the differences, the sort of uprootedness that comes with studying in another place, and we tend to have the resources and facilities to accommodate you a little bit and help you prepare for that. And also that includes making you aware of student orgs and clubs and other activities that you might want to partake in during your semester. We try to give you that experience. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Okay, Eman Yokio asks, is the official stamp mandatory on the letter of recommendation or just the signature? We prefer a stamp if you can get it. If it's not possible, it's not the end of the world. What is important is that we can have a clear institutional affiliation, so we can see where this person is coming from, what they're doing, and we want to see that it's signed by them, so we want to make it as explicit as possible that this really was a letter prepared by this person, etc., etc. Otherwise, the stamp is not a super strict requirement. If you can get it, please do. But otherwise, that's it. A digital signature can be sufficient. Yes, we accept digital signatures for the motivation letter as well. Just to follow up on that. Good. I think I'm all caught up with the chat now. I do wanna, let's say, yeah, I do wanna pull something up again because I think it's relevant to show you. While I wait for maybe some more questions to come in. Give me a second. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, there we go. Okay. Let's see. Yes. So, I hope you can see this. I think you can. So, let's make myself a little bit smaller. So this is a map of the Euroculture network. I like this one. I think it's quite useful. So this is just, I'll keep this on in the background a little bit. So this is where you can see where all of our universities are, and you can also see what you can do at each university. So I'll just kind of leave this on in the background so you can kind of process the information a little bit. So yeah, we have 8 universities in Europe. They all work together. We know each other as coordinators. There's one consortium management. And you can choose to attend multiple of these universities if you want, but you can also choose to stay in the same place a bit longer. Oh, Patrick, that's a wonderful question. What is the sense of community like? I would like to move around quite a bit if I'm accepted, and I'm wondering if it's easy to meet other Euroculture students, even overseas. Patrick, that's very easy, I would say. Although it's overseas, we have quite a number of applicants from outside the EU, Northern America, so that's usually the US. Mexico is quite common. We have quite a number of scholarship students from Mexico. South America, also Brazil is a big. We get quite a number of applications from Brazil, the US, Mexico, Canada. Not so much. Maybe more now that they are a partner of the consortium. But the sense of community is quite strong, I would say. So I'm a graduate of the program from 2020. When I graduated, well, I'm still in touch with many Euroculture friends that I made during my studies. In fact, during my own first semester, at the end of the first year, we went on a trip. Like, one of our Brazilian classmates took us to Brazil and invited us to there. So the sense of community, I think, is very strong during the program and after the program. Oh wow, just realizing one Euroculture friend of mine is coming over to my house this weekend, traveling from France. So I'm still in touch. I still have friendships from the Euroculture program, and that's a common experience. I'm not unique in this. It's quite often the case that because the semesters are quite intense and small scale, and you work together with the same group of people for a long amount of time, that friendships form. Oh, that's wonderful, Victoria. Yeah, hi. I was in Sao Paulo in 2000. Oh, that's about the New Year's 2019, 2018, 19. So New Year's 2019, I was in Sao Paulo. Yeah, wonderful place. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, yeah. So the sense of community is strong, and I think it's a highlight of the program. One other thing is the sense of we are all in this together, especially post-graduation. You often see cooperation and collaboration when it comes to like, hey guys, I found this vacancy. I wanted to share it with you. Maybe it's interesting. So people tend to see the alumni network as a resource and as an opportunity to socialize, and I think we think that's very valuable. That's extremely valuable. So yeah, that sense of community I think is quite strong. It's hard to sort of quantify or describe aside from personal anecdotes, but maybe one sense to a good. Maybe you've already seen this, but our students maintain their own magazine called the Euroculture, which I just linked in the chat. That's entirely student run. They're quite active on social media as well. They do like weekly job fairs, and they do interviews, and they post like articles and stories and media content that sort of really give you the student perspective really actively as it's being experienced by the students. So if you're interested in that direction of questioning, let's say if you want to talk to students, this is a great resource really to get in touch. You can check out our team page, and you can see who the current students are that are running the program, or the program, I say the social media team or the Euroculture team. So in terms of community, I think that's a good place to go. Yeah, so it's let's say to summarize, I would say it's a community of motivated professionals that are looking to collaborate when it makes sense, to socialize when it is fun, those kinds of things. So that's the character, let's say, of the alumni community. A general question: what should the motivation letter look like? That's a good question. The motivation letter should be within the formal requirements, so I think 5,000 characters. What you should try to avoid is saying things like, I really like traveling. I would try to be more specific. What I would propose that you focus on is the reasons why Euroculture makes sense for you because of your previous academic trajectory. So why does it make sense for you to study Euroculture based on your previous academic background? What you could focus on quite a bit, as well as what do you want to do during Euroculture. So what are the skills you want to learn? What are the careers you want to pursue? What are the academic interests that you have during your studies? What do you want to develop? And then finally, it's also, I think, valuable to think about what can Euroculture offer you post your studies. What can it do for your career, for your academic personal career? Experiencing new cultures is a good point to mention once, but that shouldn't be a main reason. You should probably be a bit more specific. That's a trap that people fall into. Yeah, I just really like traveling and going to all these different places and seeing meeting new people. That's a good attitude in general, but it's not a good reason to study this program necessarily by itself. So that's something that you should try to be careful with, is framing that carefully, that you don't focus too much on the fun side of things and also focus on the the professional side of things. Yeah, hope that's clear. Does the consortium assist with finding accommodation, or is that something you have to do on your own? So the responsibility to find housing is your own, but we do have resources to support you. So for example, we generally always give you an overview of all the short stay housing options available. In some countries this is extremely easy, and it's just a matter of signing up and you're done. So for example, Olomouc is quite easy, Krakow is quite easy, Strasbourg is very easy, Göttingen is quite easy. The Netherlands, however, is quite tough. As some of you might know, the housing market in Groningen is quite tough, fairly expensive as well. I think most Euroculture universities are not so difficult with housing, but the Netherlands can be a little bit tougher, even because it's a very privatized market, so that makes things, there's no campus, let's say. How do I say this? Okay, so let's say for Groningen, actually there is practically guaranteed housing available. That's through SSH. They provide special housing for joint degree students, so it's a special category that gets priority. So actually, it's quite easy to find a housing offer in Groningen. It's also just a matter of the price range and whether that's affordable for you. Because some of their housing options can be a little bit more expensive. It can be between 400 to 600 euros roughly. So the 400 euro options are of course not too bad, but the 600 euro options can be a bit tough. But that's just for Groningen. Other Euroculture universities are quite a bit easier, and it's just a matter of signing up and you're in. So that's just something to keep in mind. Also, if you go to our website, actually, on the mobility page, so we tried to clarify all this stuff there as well. So Euroculture, so we just relaunched our website. It's a great resource now, I think, for a lot of this information. So also be sure to take a look there. In terms of career prospects after Euroculture, do you also include international business? International business is, of course, a fairly broad term. I would say it's a less popular category. It's not impossible. Maybe I can show you. Do I still have the graph in this presentation? No, because it's a bit old. But essentially, we do have students in those fields, but they're a little bit less common, because what you see is generally many of our graduates end up closer to civil society work, NGOs, other organizations that are within the non-governmental sphere or even in the governmental sphere. So it's a less popular category, but there's also students that have worked in banking and finance. There are students that work in politics and history and research, and so the diversity is quite broad, so it's difficult for me to say that it doesn't happen, but it's not a large category compared to some of the others. Hope that makes sense. Jacob asks, how does the financing system work for scholarship recipients? Will a new bank account be made for them? No, you have to make your own new bank account once you get to Europe. We can send you your first installment for travel to a non-European bank account, but after that you have to make your own bank account once you get to the EU. So that means that you have to make sure that you get that ready as soon as you get here, because oftentimes you need a European bank account, requires a residence permit here, or it requires you to have an address in a European country. But there are some banks, like N26 or Revolut, who I think can create an account for you in the European context without requiring an address in Europe already. So that might be good options for some of you. Yeah, but we don't make an account for you. You submit the details of your bank account to us, and then we will basically set the transfers in motion automatically. So every month you will automatically get the funds, usually around the 25th of each month for the next month. So on the 25th of August you would get the scholarship installment covering September. That's the idea. Ooh, okay, good. So I've been familiarizing myself with the program since last year, and I would like to add that the new website improvements are perfect. It's easier to navigate. That's wonderful news. I'm very glad to hear that, because I worked on that a lot personally, so I very much appreciate that compliment. Thank you very much for that. It was a fair bit of work on my side as well, so I appreciate that you recognize that. Okay, I don't see too many other questions. Let's see, are there any specific elements that I haven't covered yet? So maybe let's go into the fees if you are interested in applying as a self-financing student. So generally speaking, we do have the following fee structure. As is the case with every European university, we differentiate between European nationals and non-European nationals. Generally speaking, European nationals pay 6,300 euros for the entire program. They can add the health insurance that the grant students also get for another 1,000, and this also includes the tuition fee waiver that's mentioned on the website. So, tuition fee wise for European nationals, this is a competitive rate. It's actually for Erasmus Mundus programs, it's also quite cheap compared to many of the other ones. For example, we have another one here at the University of Groningen called NOHA, which is 10,000 euros for the entire program. So that's quite a bit more. So generally speaking, our program is fairly affordable. But for non-European nationals, yeah, this is just the way higher education works. It's not really specific to Euroculture, but the fees are a bit higher. It's 18,000 euros for the whole program, which if you compare that to American or even British tuition fee rates, that's still it's actually quite affordable still. Although, of course, in some other national contexts, that's a lot of money. So yeah, that's the situation when it comes to tuition fees. It should be noted, of course, that Aon ICS Complete Insurance is also included for non-European nationals in those fees. The fees also include many other elements of the program, so maybe it's good to actually specify that because people sometimes get confused. So once you pay this fee amount, you don't have to pay fees to anyone or anything else. You don't have to pay fees directly to a university anymore. Once you pay the fees to us, we will then pay the universities that you go to on your behalf. So you don't have to deal with national tuition fees on top of this or anything like that. Some people sometimes worry about this. No, you pay one fee rate and that covers all your registration at all the Euroculture universities that you're going to. It gives you access to the Euroculture consortium. It covers all administrative costs at all the universities that you're going to. Of course, it gives you access to me and the Euroculture secretariat and the Euroculture coordinators at the different universities for help and support. You get access to all facilities of the universities that you choose to attend, so you will be registered as full-time students there, meaning that you are eligible to receive all the benefits that a regular student at that university would. So for example, in Germany that includes free travel by train for a large section of the I think Niedersachsen region, so that's quite good. Alright, you get joint master thesis supervision, you get the joint diploma recognition, and you get the intensive program as well. As I mentioned, that's covered in all the fee rates as well. Patrick, yeah, good addition. Yeah, absolutely. Revolut is it's a good bank to use for our international traveling community, so feel it's a good option, although in many cases it might also be worth considering to get a bank in the country that you're going to, because I think some of these less established banks compared to some of the other ones can come with some service dips in service that regular banks might not have, but then again it depends on what works best in your situation. Oh, I see that my slideshow disappeared. Okay, I think that's all I want to cover there. I'm just going to put myself back on the screen. Good. Is the Aon insurance good for the overseas semester too? Yes, it is. The Aon insurance covers you globally in any country but the country that you're originally from. So what that means is you don't actually need any other insurance. Mary asks, thank you so much for such a detailed session. Much appreciated. Do you have maybe any sort of last advice for Erasmus Mundus applicants? Yes, I have tons of advice actually. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to hear that my fellow alumnus of the program couldn't join in because they would have also told you what it was like to apply last year, for example. But I have all kinds of tips and tricks that I would be happy to share. Generally speaking, I think we covered the motivation letter. I would say make sure that all your documents are in order and submitted in time. This is a basic one, but often a criterion that applications fall flat on. So really, like if your file is not complete, we discard it. It's very simple. Unfortunately, we get too many applications to waste time on incomplete applications. And this is the same for many. It's not that different from a job application in that sense. Spelling mistakes. Once happens, twice is an issue, 3 times, and you're on your way out. So also be careful with those kinds of things. Make sure that your language use is proper. These are just basic tips, but do matter very much for the selection, because here's maybe a shocking statistic, but maybe 40 to 50% of the applications submitted to us do not even pass this basic filter, where it's like the file is incomplete, the file is not relevant, some issue with the language test, something. It's very unfortunate to lose an applicant based on these kinds of things, but we get frankly quite a number of applications for the scholarship, and we don't have time to waste on applications that are incomplete. So that's a general tip. Just be careful before you submit. If you accidentally submit something and you realize the problem before January 10, just let me know. I can reopen your application and give you an opportunity to fix it. It doesn't matter when you submit as long as it is before January 10. We don't look at date of submission for the scholarship as long as it is before the deadline. Jacob, any advice for the CV format? So a good format to go off is the Europass format. This is one that is also useful to use if you're ever interested in working in Brussels. Is it advisable to include online courses and certificates? Yes. So yeah, Coursera, sure. Add whatever experience you think is relevant. It's also about the CV is also about finding a way to present yourself in such a way that you think works best for you. There's no perfect answer here, but usually these kinds of experience are very much relevant. Yeah. So Europass is a good format to maybe base it on. It doesn't need to be precisely like that, but if you're interested in working in the Brussels region, that's the format that's going to be required for your CV anyway, so it might be useful to get started on thinking that way. Roughly how many applicants do you usually get for the January 10th deadline? Well, we don't usually give out specific numbers, but we're dealing with multiple hundreds. We're not dealing with thousands, luckily, but usually last year we had about 600 to 700 applications for the scholarship. The reason we don't give that number is because it is actually more intimidating. It's actually less intimidating than it sounds, because of course, keep in mind we have to deal with things like geographical diversity. We have to deal with things like applications being incomplete. Like with what I mentioned, 50% of applicants can just disappear because their files are incomplete. So really, it isn't as bad as it sounds, but it does mean that we have to be strict in our requirements to save as much time as we can, roughly. Yeah, so we're dealing with multiple hundreds of applications, but you have to divide, and it's a complicated process, and because basically you're not competing against the entire world. You're competing against people within your region with your relevant background. So it might be from the hundreds of applications that you are mostly just competing with 3 other people for a scholarship in a particular category. So that's why I tend not to give the number. I gave it because I trust this audience. No, no, but because it's more intimidating than it sounds. I wouldn't worry about that too much. If you submit a good application, you have a fair chance of getting the scholarship. Yeah, but it is competitive. You're not going to be the only one. Hope that's more or less clear. For and I should distinguish that from self-financing applications. So for the May deadline, so for the self-financing students, at the moment it's, like I mentioned, not really that competitive at all. So if you're interested in this program and you think you can finance it yourself, you can basically get that self-financing, especially if you are already ready to apply by January 10. Your first position is basically guaranteed. So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah. Kairos, do you also appreciate global applicants with a background in local politics? Absolutely. All political, if you have actual political experience, that's super relevant. Like I mentioned, many of our alumni work in national and local politics, so it's not uncommon at all. So absolutely include that experience as well. Yeah. Jakob, are we able to check more information about our regional competition? No. No, we also, because we are dealing with large numbers of applications, we give very limited feedback on the individual application process. Usually, maybe if you've done this application before, maybe you didn't make it, we tend to give you a rejection or acceptance email. Basically, there are 3 different results. Either you aren't eligible under any circumstances, maybe because, for example, your file wasn't complete. The other result is you are eligible to join the program, but you didn't make it for the scholarship, or you are considered for the scholarship. If you are considered for the scholarship, but you didn't get it right away, you will be placed on the reserve list. You do get to see your ranking compared to the list. So if you are a reserve list candidate, you will receive a ranking. But if you were not eligible at all, you will not receive a ranking, because we don't rank ineligible candidates. And also we don't rank ineligible scholarship candidates that are eligible for the self-financing studies. That's a little complicated, but I hope that makes sense. If my scholarship application is rejected, but I receive a self-funding place, yes. So Patrick, that's kind of what I was trying to say right now. Basically, if you get the result of your application in March, if you apply for the scholarship, and that result can be, sorry, you didn't get the scholarship, but maybe you want to join as a self-financing student. So yes, you will find that out in March. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Is it possible to reach previous or current students for review of the letter of motivation or CV? You can reach out to previous students or current students. I would recommend, I'm going to link you to the Euroculture again. That's really the easiest, shortest link to, or let's say what you might call unmediated access to our students, because otherwise the program is involved and maybe you feel that that's not independent enough. But I would say students that get accepted usually can maybe share their experience, but what works for them might not work for you. So be careful about going for the student feedback based approach, because their formula for success might have relied on something that you might not be able to provide, whereas your profile would have been better suited taking a different approach. So like I mentioned, there is no perfect application, and that's also good to mention. Getting rejected for the scholarship doesn't mean that you're not a good student. You can always reach out to me. Yes, Jacob, absolutely. You can reach out to me at euroculture@rug.nl. That's a direct line to me. Just reach out whenever you want. On our website, under the news section, or under the contact section, you can actually, if you scroll down a bit, schedule an online individual meeting with me. Usually, though, I only accept those meetings if there are questions that I cannot answer by email, because, of course, otherwise it would take up a lot of time. if you feel like a personal meeting is necessary, we can facilitate that. If you are in the Netherlands, feel free to drop by my office. It's 1315 0224. I don't think any of you are in the area, I suspect, but you can actually reach me in the Harmony building of the Faculty of Arts in the University of Groningen, which is where I am right now. Good. Hi. In terms of... did I finish my point about the CV? I think so. Okay. Hi. In terms of submitting a sample academic writing, can I submit a group undergraduate thesis instead? We created it as a group. It's tough. I would say yes, if you can somehow clarify which parts were written by you. We really do prefer individual work if it is available. So maybe a course assignment might be a better fit. That's what I applied with when I applied for Euroculture, is I applied using a course paper of 2,000 words and not like... I didn't apply with a thesis because I didn't have mine ready at the time because I didn't apply for the scholarship. But still, yeah, that's maybe good to mention. Patrick, thanks a lot, Yelmar. This was super useful. Glad you think so. That's good. For any of you that maybe missed part of the session, this is going to be uploaded as a video on demand, so a VOD. So it's going to be on this YouTube channel forever. You can use it or go back to particular parts of it whenever you want. I might add some channel tags, but it takes a fair bit of time, like let's say timestamps is the word I'm looking for. Yeah, timestamps. I might add those if I have a moment, but I don't always, so maybe that's not the case this time. Okay then. I think we're already nearing the end of the presentation. Is there anything else that I want to cover now? No, I don't think there's any particular thing I want to cover. I just want to restate, our website is the best source of information you can get. Because it's up to date, it's current. We worked quite hard on making it more accessible. There's also a detailed FAQ, which is maybe a little bit harder to find. It's under the how to apply section. You can find it there. Here you go. There you go. There you go. So euroculturemaster.eu/FAQ. This FAQ is super useful as well because it it's quite detailed. There's quite a number of questions that you can find answered in here as well. I will answer your questions. Like I said, I'm running out the clock, so if you have questions, feel free to stick around. But basically, to those of you who don't have any more questions, thank you so much for coming by and asking all these questions. It's a lot more fun for me if we actually get the chance to talk with each other and answer and give you information about the things that you actually care about. So glad that you are finding this useful and helpful. Like you probably saw, we're going to be doing 2 more of these, one more in December and one more in January, so that's quite close to the application deadline, but good. So we'll be back as well. Wonderful. Really glad that you found it useful. So feel free to stick around if you still have questions. I'm going to answer all the questions in chat, but otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day, morning, evening, afternoon, whatever time it is for you. Glad that you found it useful, and hope to see you in Euroculture in September 2024. Wonderful. Okay, good. Lovely. Going back to your questions. I have worked for several years in an NGO for justice. Is it a good point to share my observations in value-embracing gaps between my country office and others in the EU? That's wonderful. Yes, absolutely. Sharing your reflections in relation to your motivation for the program and maybe how you want to address these concerns using the skills that you've learned during Euroculture, that's a wonderful motivation. Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely mention that. That's very good. So, and this is also the thing. Don't take this as a pro-EU propaganda program. That's something that, oh yeah, well, they're funded by the European Union, so they must be they must be uncritical or something like that. No, 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 absolutely not. Euroculture takes a very critical approach to its academic work, to the processes of European integration. When it comes to the freedom to express your viewpoints, yes, absolutely. That's Euroculture provides a broad framework for that. Of course, you'll learn about cultural sensitivities and dealing with people from different cultures and formulating your points constructively. Obviously, that's very important. But critical opinions are valued very strongly in this program. If you perceive, for example, like the EU's democratic deficit, so the reduction in democracy in the EU, that's wonderful things to discuss during your program as well. So critical reflections are very much appreciated. I wish I would have given you more examples. I want to maybe give you some more content examples. One other thing. So on our YouTube channel, so you're already here, you'll find that we also have some student projects on there. One is a documentary made by one of our students, a group of our students in Udine, and another one is a presentation that they made in 2022. But there's a bunch of other projects that students have worked on over the years: debates, events, cultural exchange events. There's so much to choose from that it's always hard to make choices. Can I maybe give you like some old master thesis topics? That would be nice. Give me a second. Okay, maybe this works. If I can just reduce this. Okay, so let me just remove my own face for a second. So this is an older presentation, but it still checks out. So you have all these. These are some organizations that you might be able to work with during your studies. Yes. Okay. So here are also some topics for master theses that might be relevant to you. Europe in a global context, integration and identity, migration, minority, citizenship, culture, heritage, memory. Really, there's so much rich interdisciplinary content that you can choose from that it's impossible to summarize almost. Yeah, could have reflected on that more, but that's also something that you can talk about current students with. Okay, the work sample I want to submit takes a critical perspective on Western and EU media, so it had me worried, but now I can go ahead. Absolutely, do take critical perspectives. Those are appreciated. We need critical voices to improve, to learn, to grow. Critical thinking is crucial in this program, so don't worry about being critical. It is, in fact, an asset as opposed to a risk in the context of Euroculture. Is there? Oh well, I guess maybe this is maybe a good point to close on for the diehards following this presentation. Still, build a career after graduation. So these are the sectors divided by percentages that you actually see. Yeah. So just to break this down a little bit, so education includes research and maybe also educational support work. So that would be something like me. I fall under educational support, and I'm not an academic, but I still work in education. So yeah. And there's a lot of our students that work in politics and international relations, a fair number that work in consultancy, marketing and PR, a small amount working in the arts and culture, communications and media. Well, that's, I think, self-explanatory because our students learn to present very well, learn how to deal with intercultural differences, learn how to be sensitive to questions and answer them well, write well, think well, critically. So all those things are great assets when working in consultancy, marketing and PR. Then there's some other smaller sectors like international development, social affairs, security and anti-terrorism, environmental affairs. Oof, yeah, well, the diversity of the program is reflected in the diversity of what people do after the program as well. So it's very tough to summarize, but What you can also look for is under the careers section on our website. Yeah, we mentioned some of this information, and there's also some testimonials across the board that are a bit shorter, but hope the resources can serve you well. Okay, final questions. We're nearing the end of our session here, so I want to, let's see, close things out very soon. I don't see any final questions. Maybe you're chatting them out, so I will start off by saying thank you all so much for your time and attention and making this session so interactive and engaging. That's wonderful. I'm glad that I was able to help you with some of your questions. You know where to find me: euroculturemaster.eu, euroculture@rug.nl. Our social media pages, we're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Feel free to join our alumni groups, our web pages, our social media groups, whatever you can find. We're always happy to engage with you. And questions usually answered by email, the fastest. That's just a good thing to keep in mind. Anything else? I don't think so. Thanks, everyone. And maybe see you in the future during the next session. Maybe see you see your application. Maybe see you next year. Who knows? I wish you good luck with your applications, and maybe we'll be in touch. Okay, well, I am closing the stream. Goodbye, everyone.